I missed my brother's funeral. Not because I was sick, not because I was out of town, but because nobody thought to tell me until it was already over. And the strangest part is, I understood why. My name is Arthur. I'm 81 years old. I live alone in a small house on the coast of Maine, where the mornings are quiet and the wind smells like salt and pine. I'm a retired librarian. I never married. I never had children. My closest companion now is a grey cat named Shelley, after the poet, who sleeps in the same sunlit spot every afternoon. I've always been the kind of person people forget without meaning to. Not because they're cruel, not because they don't care, but because I made it easy. For most of my life, I thought that was something to be proud of. I believed one thing, deeply and foolishly. If I stay out of the way, I'll be okay. His row. That sentence shaped everything. It became my religion, my excuse, my shield. It started early. I was the quiet child, the one who didn't argue, the one teachers called well-behaved. I learned how to disappear politely. I said yes when I meant no. I apologized for needing anything. I tried so hard not to be a burden that I eventually stopped taking up space at all. When my father became ill, my older brother James dropped out of college to help at home. He took the hard role without complaint. I stayed quiet. I stayed in school, buried in books, telling myself that succeeding silently was my contribution. James was always louder than me. Not arrogant, just present. He walked into rooms like he belonged there. People noticed him. People asked for him. I admired that, but I also feared it. I convinced myself that being unnoticed was safer. When James got married and didn't ask me to be his best man, I smiled and told him it was fine. When they moved 2 towns over and invitations became less frequent, I told myself I preferred solitude. Every time someone forgot me, I found a reason why they should have. That lie followed me everywhere. In my 20s, I had dreams that never became plans. I wanted to travel. I wanted to see the great libraries of Europe, to stand in places where history lived on shelves. But when the principal at my school offered me a permanent position and said I had a calming presence, I accepted immediately. So I stayed. And then last winter, my brother died. A heart attack, quick, quiet, almost ordinary in the way death can sometimes be. I didn't hear about it right away. I found out a week later through a voicemail from his son. His voice was uncertain, like someone leaving a message for a distant relative they weren't quite sure how to speak to. "Hey, Uncle Arthur," he said. "Sorry we didn't call sooner. Everything happened so fast. Hope you're doing okay." End quote. That was it. I remember standing in my kitchen, holding my phone, listening to the message again, as if repetition might change the meaning. On the counter sat a birthday card I'd meant to send James. Still sealed. Still waiting. And in that moment, I realized something simple, something I'd been practicing my whole life. I had stayed out of the way so well that eventually no one knew where to find me. That was the pattern. Not one mistake, not one cruel decision. Just years of small disappearances. I didn't demand anything. I didn't ask for a seat at the table. I didn't remind people I existed. I became the person who was easy. The one who didn't need much. The one who wouldn't be offended. And people believed me. It happened in quiet increments. A holiday invitation that didn't come. A family update I learned weeks later. A phone call that rang once, maybe twice, before they assumed I wasn't home. I never corrected them. I never said, "Please try again." I told myself I was being considerate. But consideration, taken too far, becomes erasure. James built a life full of noise and motion, children, neighbours, birthdays, arguments, laughter. I stayed in my calm little house, surrounded by books and routine, watching the years stack up like unopened letters. I sent cards. I sent polite message. I signed them the same way every time. Love, Arthur. But love, from a distance, begins to feel like formality. There were moments when I could have stepped forward. Moments when the door was not locked, only unpushed. Once, my nephew called in the middle of a Saturday. I remember because I was shelving books in my study, humming absent-mindedly, and the phone startled me. I stared at it ringing, my heart oddly racing, as if attention itself were dangerous. By the time I picked it up, it stopped. I could have called back. I didn't. I told myself he was busy. I told myself it wasn't important. That was always my instinct. Shrink first, to explain later. Years passed like that. In photographs, I became a margin, a face in the corner at weddings. Then not even that. I was the relative people spoke about vaguely, as if I were a place they once visited. Oh, Arthur's still up in Maine, right? Still, as if I were an object left somewhere. And then, after James died, there was that voicemail. Those careful, uncertain words. Hope you're doing okay. And Mina, I wasn't. But I didn't respond. That was the cruelest part of the pattern. Even grief couldn't make me reach out. I didn't call back. I didn't ask what happened. I didn't ask when the funeral was, or whether there had been one. I didn't ask if my brother had wanted me there. I stayed quiet. The silence felt familiar, like an old coat I'd worn so long I forgot it was heavy. The next morning, the house was cold. I hadn't turned the heat up. The kind of cold that seeps into your fingertips, that makes the air feel thin. I stood in the kitchen with a mug of tea that tasted faintly metallic, like the water had sat too long in the kettle. On the counter was the birthday card. It was still there. A simple envelope, cream-coloured, my brother's name written in careful ink. I ran my thumb along the sealed edge, feeling the slight roughness of the paper. Inside was a message I'd written weeks earlier. Happy birthday, James. I hope you know I think of you often. Is me know? Often. Such a safe word. Such a distant word. I held the card and realized it would never be opened. The room was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum, the soft ticking of the clock above the sink. His smile was small, strained, but still his. On either side of him were two women I didn't recognize, holding his hands, leaning close as if their warmth could keep him anchored. He was surrounded, and I was nowhere. The photo was glossy, cold against my fingers. I could smell the faint ink and paper scent, sharp and sterile, like a doctor's office. My hands trembled slightly as I stared. My brother had a final day, a final room, final faces, and I wasn't one of them. I sat there with that picture in my lap, the house utterly still around me. The only sound was the ticking clock, steady and indifferent. And then, finally, the lie cracked open. I had spent my whole life believing, if I stay out of the way, I'll be okay. But that wasn't humility. It was fear. Fear of being unwanted. Fear of being inconvenient. Fear of hearing no. So instead of risking rejection, I chose invisibility. And invisibility worked until it didn't. Because people don't forget you all at once. They forget you slowly. Quiet people don't disappear. They dissolve. They stop checking in because you never reach back. They stop inviting because you always decline. They stop imagining you in the room because you've trained them not to. I made it easy. And they followed the path of least resistance, not out of cruelty, but out of life's constant noise. Families are loud. Time moves fast. Absence becomes normal. This is the first lesson I learned too late. One of many quiet ways a life can disappear. That's the truth. No one tells the quiet ones. If you are always the person who says, it's fine. If you are always the person who insists, don't worry about me. If you swallow your needs until even you can't hear them anymore, one day you may discover the world believed you. This is not a story about a funeral. It's a warning about disappearing. Because loneliness doesn't always arrive with drama. Sometimes it arrives like unopened mail, like a phone that never rings, like a chair that stays empty so long no one remembers it was yours. Maybe you're watching this late at night, in a room that feels too still. Maybe you've told yourself the same lie I did, that you don't need much, that you're okay on your own, that reaching out would be awkward, that you've missed your chance. You haven't. Not yet. But you will, if you keep waiting for someone else to notice your silence. Send the message. Make the call. Say the sentence that feels too vulnerable. I want to be in your life. Because the cost of staying small is not peace. It's absence. I look at that photograph sometimes. My brother's hands held by strangers while mine remained politely folded miles away. And the coldest truth is this. They didn't shut me out. I stepped back so far. I vanished. If you're one of the quiet ones, stay here. You don't have to vanish. If this hit you, comment, quiet. I'll know you're still here.